Welcome to the third season of Heard the Afros and Audio interview series. My guest today is William Sutphin. How are you, man? Nice to see you.
Thank you, Talib. Nice to finally meet you as well. And I've seen so many things that you've been doing in the audio industry, so it's a privilege, sir, to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So let's jump in. You are an accomplished man, and I'm excited to hear more about your story and what you've been able to create yourself. So, from teaching in Harlem to creating award winning films and podcasts, how has your journey shaped your storytelling approach?
My journey has been able to see multi sides of the American experience for a black man who is middle class, has touched lives in different groups. Like you said, I lived in Harlem for 16, 17 years. I was fortunate to go to Columbia Film School, which is another ilk within itself. I went to Hampton University before all of that. Lived in California, lived down south. I guess it gives me a pretty good reservoir to tell the stories that I try to tell. I believe that a person should be able to tell any story that they want to, but I also believe you should tell a story of the world in which you're familiar with. And since a lot of my stories are grounded in black culture or black history, I guess you could say that's my strong suit.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you, man. The more that your worldview expands, the more that you have to draw from to tell
Exactly.
to tell those stories, because there are people everywhere and they all have their own experiences, and each of us have our own story, and to be willing to listen to them. When you started talking, it reminded me of Zora Neale Hurston, and she's become a theme on this podcast quite a bit because of who she is. We honor her as the anthropologist and storyteller that she was, and she traveled. She went to different places. She sat in these different rooms and listened.
First of all, to mention Zora Neale Hurston within the same context of anything I'm talking about, I really appreciate that. As a matter of fact, travels have informed me. Yeah, I've traveled to Europe, I've traveled to Mexico, to the tropics, just the basic travels that middle class black American would be able to do. Actually, when I lived in Harlem before I traveled, I did see myself as a Langston Hughes kind of guy. Since you mentioned Zora Neale Hurston, I did see myself like 20 years ago as a Langston Hughes ish kind of guy. I only lived about a half a block from his house. I could walk to his house from where I lived in Harlem. It would be like a 2.5, 3 minute walk. And I wanted to have that sort of clean cut, like Langston Hughes, County Cullen kind of appearance. As you can see, that's gone away now. It's more of a mountain man look. But back then, it was definitely like this polished writer. And I used to go around Harlem in the city with a little notebook or something like that, thinking that I might be a journalist or something. The closest I got to being a journalist, I did work for television news as a news assistant, but the closest I got to journalism was working for Star Magazine for 5, 6 months. That's a rag, but I did. I've long fancied myself a storyteller in the mode of those Harlem Renaissance type. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I picked the right ancestors today. I have Langston Hughes up here.
Look at that.
I collect black and white postcards. Little known fact about me, I'm the first time I've ever mentioned it out loud. Most of them are ancestors at this point that I have collected, and I've decided this year to switch them out for every guest. Let intuition tell me what to put up there. All I did was put my hand in the stack and was like, okay,
Look at that.
Langston Hughes, I'll put it up there.
Look at
Yeah, shout out to Harlem, man. My daughter had the privilege of helping to clean and doing the restoration project of Langston Hughes' home. I've sat there and had conversations in communities. Its own thing, man. It's its
yeah.
own magic. And knowing that you walk the same sidewalks, if you're tapped in, it becomes an experience. Just
Oh
knowing
yeah.
that you're in the same space.
Oh yeah. When you went there, was it? It was owned by at the time. I went there where they actually made a dock back in like the early 2000s, owned by a gentleman named Albert, a white.
I would say it was right before the pandemic. So we probably
Ah,
did
yeah.
this in 2019 was
Okay.
both of our experiences, my daughter and myself. And then she went to the Junior Scholars Program at Schaumburg
Wow.
for 3 years. Yeah. So shout out to Harlem, man.
What's a Harlem?
I love it. What inspired you to transition from filmmaking to podcasting? How does audio storytelling differ for you from visual storytelling?
I'll tell you about the transition, then I'll tell you how it differs.
Okay.
Well, the transition was something that was seeded long before I even went to film school, or long before anyone called anything a podcast. In the 90s, when I used to commute to work and come back home, especially on the commute to work, they would have the morning radio, and they would be up to all kinds of hijinks in the morning radio. At the time, mid 90s, Tom Joyner, see, I'm making the transition from the hip hop morning show to the adult morning show that my parents listened to. So I'm listening to Tom Joyner, and they have this soap opera on Tom Joyner, which was like
I
a series.
remember it.
And I loved the way it would be like, well, such and such, tune in again. And so I was like, wow, I like that cheesy kind of soap opera thing. And I was like, that's really cool. And so that seed was already planted then. As we went to my filmmaking life, coming to audio was more of a necessity because I needed to let my stories be heard. Now, I had won the Directors Guild of America Award. I had licensed that film that won the award to HBO and Cinemax and all that. But when I came out of film school in 2008, I was in my mid-30s. I was closing on 40, coming out of film school. Most folks come out of film school, they're 25, 26. So I was already coming out of film school with a hot film. 40 was around the corner. You know what I mean? And for my younger classmates, it happened. They went into their 30s with that momentum of being 20 something, and they went on to become showrunners and so forth and so on. Whatever the case may be, I don't want to sound like someone who is complaining, but whatever the case may be, it didn't happen for me. Audio. So I'm working in retail on Beverly Hills, Neiman Marcus, and in the morning we're getting things together, and I'm hearing these anthologies, and I discovered it just because I was looking for something to listen to. And I think back then, with the way Apple had the music set up, you could find a podcast in the iTunes or something like that back in like 2016, 2017, whatever. And I found these anthologies, man. I was like, let me listen to this. And they were all offbeat and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, seeing the movie, even though it's an audio, I'm seeing the movie. I want to do that. And so being a filmmaker, anything I do is going to try to create a cinematic story. And so when I went into an audio, recorded Hoodwink, my first audio drama in 2019, the care to make it as cinematic as Book and Olivia is to me, my current audio drama, it wasn't there because I didn't have the experience. But when I came and did Book and Olivia a couple of years later, having gained a lot of knowledge in just 2 years of having your own podcast, there's a lot of knowledge you're going to learn. If you don't turn it over to the audio engineer or just send it over to Fiverr or Upwork and just let some guy take your project, if you sit there and try to learn Logic, GarageBand, progressing from GarageBand to Logic or Audition, if you do it, you're going to learn something and you're going to become an independent audio producer. And that's what I did. The desire to just make my audio be a movie for your ears. And I think I've gotten there with the product that I recently released with Book and Olivia. I think a person can close their eyes and listen to Book and Olivia, and they can see the conflict, they can see the characters, they can see the facial expression. And I think I'm in a good place now as far as an audio creator. That's why I call myself the audio auteur.
I love that. I did a audio drama in 2017, and it was my first podcast in the industry. And I often think about and talk about the soap opera as one of those first places that I heard and could vividly see these characters,
Right.
the environment, whether they knew what they were doing or not in that space, who knows? But it was, I think, for many of us, that first experience of listening to some type of audio drama, radio drama, because during the golden era of radio, we weren't a part of that at all.
Right.
Unless they were playing us and caricatures of us or storylines that have nothing to do with us as people. And to know that we have this opportunity now in audio drama is something that I want so much for us to build just as much of an exhaustive library as you can find for the golden era of radio, because this is the opportunity. So I appreciate you for being in this space, because it is so important, bringing a sense of excellence and transferable skills to the space. This stuff becomes historical. This becomes a part of our legacy. So I just thank you for moving to audio dramas, because we need you here for sure.
Since you bring up
Please.
soap operas, it's almost been a full circle moment because actually starting in mid-February, I am going to be writing on a soap opera
Okay.
because they listen to my audio drama.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, so in mid-February, I've already signed the papers and all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna be working for Days of Our Lives.
All
Yeah,
right.
at 54 years old, finally got a
Respect.
job again.
Yeah. Respect, man. Congratulations. It just goes to say, and this is something that we've talked about before on the podcast, and actually spoke with another audio dramatist who has a really great body of work, won some awards as well. And the fact that keep working. When you're not able for whatever reason to do that, whether it's budget, you have this opportunity in audio drama and it builds a portfolio. And as long as you keep working, folks will see it. Folks will come to you.
For sure, man. The thing about it is, you also got to respect audio for being audio. You can't look at audio as just, oh, this is my side chick or this is my jump off until, no, listen, you can take audio and you can really run with it. If you are committed to bringing quality audio out there, you could put some series out there. You could, in the comfort of your own home, create a project that is just as good as someone in the studio's studio. You know,
Absolutely.
for all intents and purposes, it's like the old analog versus plug-in arguments. It's got to be, you know, if you got the old components, use that, and it's going to sound different, and no one notices the difference. Okay, so if you got enough equipment in your garage or your attic studio, you can put out a product that's just as good as whatever Wondery's putting out, whatever Amazon's putting out, so
For
forth and so
sure.
on. You know what I mean?
For
So
sure.
so don't let it stop you.
Not at all. I want to talk about Booker and Olivia.
Thank you.
It shed lights on an overlooked historical partnership. What drew you to their story, and why do you think it's important to share it now?
Wow, man. I wrote Book and Olivia coming out of films about 2009, 2010. And coming out of Hampton, Booker T. Washington is a set ancestor that's revered. Because I don't know if you know, Booker T. Washington went to Hampton. The story of Booker T. Washington walking that long, arduous journey from the little hamlet he lived in West Virginia all the way to Hampton on the other side of Virginia, and the whole sort of tests that he had to take to prove that he was worthy to go to Hampton because he was young when he got there. And that's legend at Hampton University. And Booker T. Washington is a larger than life statue on our campus. He's Hamptonian number one. And we're fierce. As Hamptonians, we're fierce about our Hamptonians. So that was already there. Now, coming out of school, I said, somebody's going to tell Booker T. Washington's story. And I wanted to be someone who has a personal connection to Booker T. Washington. That's what I want. So I said, I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to put the story out there first so that it's ready to go whenever the producers are like, hey, I need to get the Booker T. Washington story. They're making him a moment in culture right now. You know what I mean? And so I did the research I needed to do.
Hmm.
Along the way, I discovered, I was like, wow, man, he really needed this woman. He really leaned on this woman. This woman really was the woman who, like, when Booker would take a no, was like, wait a minute, Booker, what do you mean we can't? And sometimes you need a black woman to go in there and cut through the bullshit. You know what I mean? And Olivia was that woman who could do it with tact and finesse, but with a fierceness as well. She possessed the qualities that a person needed to get ahead in the world during that era and now. And it was great that they married. Besides just having a business partnership, that developed into a romantic partnership. This is the stuff of movies. This is the stuff of our most handsome black actors of the moment portraying some sort of Reconstruction era Bridgerton. You know what I'm saying? Because I wrote it to be of that kind of like classic romance where there's this sort of tease, there's this sort of coquettishness of Olivia, there's this Booker must prove himself to be worthy to be her suitor. I wrote it to be a sort of Reconstruction era Bridgerton, if you will, long before Bridgerton was ever on the air. You know what I mean? So I thought that this was the kind of narrative that we needed to have for our historical figures, not just a recounting of they lived, they made speeches, and they helped out with civil rights. I wanted them to see, man, these people had fears, they had loves, they had temptations, and sometimes they ran for their lives
Hmm.
because they didn't have the courage.
Yeah.
But they would like, but through trial and error, they would find the courage. And so I thought that's
Hmm.
why I wanted to tell that story.
Yeah, and I love that story. It helps to take our historical figures, folks that we're taught about as someone other than ourselves, just a
Mhm. Mhm.
person with all of the things that you said, fears, loves, insecurities,
Exactly.
desires, in a way that supports all of us in saying, okay, if Booker T was a man, a regular person who made choices to progress our causes, then that's something that we all have access to. And
Right.
so I think it's so important to tell stories that don't keep them in the ethers and brings them down to earth with us.
And I think that what we often see of Booker T is Booker T, past middle age. He's gained whatever he's going to gain as far as that middle age size. And we always see that Booker T. And I was like, look, we need to see a sexy version of Booker T. Because on TikTok or Instagram, there's always things where my mama or my daddy said they used to turn all the heads back in the day. And then, oh, yeah, really? And then you start seeing the flow of pictures and you're like, damn, they ain't lie. We all had that moment where we were young and looking our best and just sort of like nothing could stop us. And I was like, we haven't seen that Booker T. And that is the setting for Booker and Olivia when he's 25, 26, 27 years old. And he's grown enough to hack this path that needs to be cut in Alabama to get the school up. But he's also young enough to make stupid mistakes.
Mhm.
So that's why I wanted us to see this Booker T.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Booker and Olivia has received critical acclaim, including a Bronze Signal Award and NAACP Image Award consideration.
Thank you.
What has this recognition meant to you as an independent creative?
Okay, let's just make sure we're on the NAACP. Didn't get a nomination, but it was considered. Oh man, when you get an email or you receive a trophy, it's validation. You know what I mean? It's validation. When I posted it, I was being fun about it, and I had the little what's the name of the DJ said, all I do is win, win, win. That's a win.
Yeah, it
Bronze is
is.
a win. I don't care if it's not gold or silver. I got another trophy to put on my mantle, and I got a couple of them. And at 54, when you get a win, man, that's like Jim Plunkett coming back after his career was over, winning the Super Bowls with the Oakland Raiders or something like that. It's sweeter when you thought it was over for yourself,
Mm.
and then you continue your work and you get a win. So that's what it was for me, man.
All right. Nice,
Yeah.
man. I'm sure that won't be the last award you get to add
Thank
to
you.
your mantle, for
Thank you, brother.
sure.
Thank you.
So, how do you balance historical accuracy with creative freedom in crafting a compelling story?
Man, listen, characters have to be condensed. You can't have 4 or 5 different pivotal characters. You got to condense it down to one. You
Hmm.
got to say this is the guy who can do everything. You know, what I mean, this third person or this other fourth person in Booker and Olivia, instead of me having 10 other characters, which would have been the actual fact. Yeah, sometimes characters have to symbolize a whole group of other characters. Sometimes you have to have that Greek chorus of characters that, like in Booker and Olivia, you have a Greek chorus that sort of comments on what Booker and Olivia are doing. Like Mr. B can't handle that. You know how students would talk about their teacher. There's a scene where the students are talking about whether or not Miss Olivia is going to give him the time of day, and somebody says Mr. B wouldn't know what to do with it if he could get it. They call Booker Mr. B. So which kind
All
of
right.
brings Booker down to somebody who can be looked at as just a regular a human being instead of a myth. And as far as historical accuracy, you can't be a slave to it. You have to know it, but then you also have to tell your story. If you could skillfully summarize, or if you have to invent to get the main message that you're trying to get across about the historical impact, then take your license as a creator and tell your story. That's why I say
Mhm.
Booker and Olivia based on a true story.
Yeah. No, that's so important that you share that, because that becomes a fork in the road for a lot of creators who
Right.
are working on material that depicts real life human beings. And you're so right. If you try to put every aspect of truth in it, the podcast will still be running. You can't possibly do that. But you give them the respect, you give them the honor of telling the most accurate story that you can tell, while also providing the download that you receive, which is your own creativity and your own ability to tell the story.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, your advice to get it finished emphasizes the importance of completion. What strategies or mindsets have helped you push through creative blocks?
I would say when you're doing a series, I would say already have a couple episodes ready to. Let's say you're going to run a 7-part series or something like that. I would say already have 2 episodes already ready to go, and know that you can create the third episode and fourth episodes in a timely fashion. Because, and I haven't always followed that advice. I have 2 series out. I haven't always followed that advice. But I'm speaking from hindsight of what a creator should do, because I'm not saying that's advice I follow. You've got to go make lesson plans for the school that you're teaching. You've got to go take care of the cat that you've adopted. You've got to go get groceries. If you're not making $175,000 a year working at an audio studio, you got other things you got to do. And enthusiasm will wane. All I can say to you is just keep plugging at it, keep doing it. You got to think about this. If you've invested all this time thus far, recording all these actors, buying, because when you're producing audio dramas, you got a lot of subscriptions to things, and they're still going to bill you if you're not using these things
Mm,
on a monthly basis. So you think about it. Do you want to have all these open and all this stuff that you've called and you're not working on it? Or do you want to work on it? You know what I mean? Maybe
yeah.
that's a way to prod people to get their work finished.
It's
And
like the
you,
gym, New
yeah,
Year's Eve.
yeah,
And then the rest of the year they collecting funds and you ain't there.
man, exactly. And you want to drop that social media post talking about, oh, new episode of such and such is done. You like that attention. I know I do. When I'm ready to drop a new episode, I may sit on it for a couple of days just to get the right promos together or whatever. But I love it. I love
Hmm.
making that announcement.
Yeah. So there's that incentive of completion for you.
Yeah,
And also, I appreciate your advice about following your own process, really understanding. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of articles and such that will tell you get up at 5 a.m., block off time, and do whatever. And you've got to find your own process, because trying to follow someone else's process that works for them,
right.
it might sustain you for a minute, but it won't sustain you forever. So, really tapping into your realities and those times where the creative energy is at its highest,
Mm-hmm.
and doing your best to matching that energy.
And I know I heard some of your guests had talked in the early episode, they talked about coming for a background where writing story was, they didn't know, they're just learning how to write story. I would say when you're writing something that is, you say, let's just say it's going to be for audio, that's going to be different than uh, screenplay, because there's cues in the visual that you say you anticipate. You can say, ah, she looks pained. They're not going to hear she looks pained in the audio series that you're creating. So you're going to have to figure out a way. And I don't know if you want the other guy saying, what's wrong? You look pained, which would be a basic way, I think, of handling it. Or if it's music that's going to heighten it, whatever the cue is to let us know that she's pained. And we don't have to see, but just let us know that character is, something's wrong with that character. You need to figure that out
Yeah,
because we can't see it.
absolutely. Audio dramas is dialogue driven in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
The ambiance, the sound design, it all matters, because unlike the written word, or you have to, where they say show don't tell, you got to tell.
Right.
You can't show anything.
Right.
And that brings me to my next question for folks who are aspiring creators of audio dramas. As someone skilled in adapting film scripts for audio, what are the key elements creators should focus on when transitioning a story to a podcast format?
All right. The thing about it is atmosphere, just the stuff that's going to be in the background that is not going to jump out to the listener, but it lays this bed. It's a bed of audio that being laid that just envelops the listener as if the listener's a baby in calm. They're pacified. Like I had a scene where Book and Olivia are talking on one of those towns in the Reconstruction era, and they're like, "We need to do this. We need to make sure we're on the same page." And I could have just had them saying, "Remember, don't go in there acting a fool." I could have just had that, but I wanted to hear in the background someone going, "Get them horses out of the street." Yeah, I wanted to have the sound of horses and wagons and the unobtrusive sound and enough sound to signal to you that this is like a small Reconstruction era town. And Booker and Olivia have come to town. And they're like, don't go in here acting a fool. Like in the old days when my grandma would say, we're going to town on Saturday. Going to town is actually, you got to put on a shirt to go to town. You know what I mean? And I wanted to, based on the action that they had when they were still on the campus where the sound was much quieter. We're going to go into town and we're going to do this. And the next scene, you can hear the background of hubbub going on. Don't embarrass me. Okay, they're in another place now. And I don't know what the original question was, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's people who have film, TV industry experience who do want to go into audio and their scripts already written for visual.
Mm-hmm.
And there's adaptation that has to occur before
Right.
you can hand this over to any audio producer or to your actors even and say, okay, we're just going to put this into audio.
Yeah.
There's some work that's got to be done, all to the point that we've made already that it's not visual. So all those things that somebody might have had on some clean shoes and you could see those,
Yeah.
somebody's got to point them out now with dialogue. It's just a whole different experience. So yeah, it's one of those things that we want more people to understand, get into it for the right reasons, as we spoke about earlier, and do it in excellence. This is such a brilliant space of storytelling because you are inviting imagination in. And that's one of the most powerful things any creator can do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. And I don't want to, I know you got stuff. I don't want to, William went on a 3-hour talk about how to transition. Just like in Book and Olivia, speaking on that same thing we just spoke about, how to get your script into form. There's a scene where she's talking to some people and the white power structure thinks that she's trespassing on their land and she's trying to tell people to come to Tuskegee. And in the script, there's a shot rings out in the air. And I think that's enough for the script. Shot rings out in the air. But in the audio drama, you got to have the shot ring out in the air, and then you got to have the echo, and you got to have the birds that were in the trees suddenly flapping away. That's something that you may not have written in the visual script. But in the audio script now, those birds flapping away, that moment of recognition of this guy just shot a shotgun off as I was talking to these prospective students. And those cues that danger is there. You got to say, hey, how do I treat this differently from the screenplay written for the visuals?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So you stress learning technical aspects for creative control and independence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For beginners, where do you recommend starting, especially with tools like Logic Pro X?
Okay. I would say GarageBand first. I would say let that be your training wheels. If you've never done any kind of, they call it nonlinear editing, or back when I was in film school in the 2000s, like Final Cut. So because I had gone to film school and done Final Cut, when I did the audio editing and I saw what GarageBand was like, I was like, I can do this. Because even though it was 10 years since I've done Final Cut, I was like, I can do this. And you know how like on the Apple phones, you got iMovie, you can make a little simple movie. If you can do that, then you can go to GarageBand and like within a couple of days, you'll be able to put audio clips together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, as you baby step into, now I want to add this and finesse it a little bit. You can go into logic as the year goes on because it'll take a little bit, but be encouraged because what you know on day one compared to 30 days later will be immense. You'll be growing immensely. It's just that you'll make more demands of yourself for what you're going to output with the more that you know. What
Hmm.
you would have accepted on day 3 or 4, now day 30, day 60, you're like, now I want it to sound like the sound's coming from over there, so forth and so on. These reverbs, I want it to sound this way and that way. And the more if you buy that program, it doesn't cost you no money to use it all day long. You might as well learn it because the more you learn it, the better you're going to be
Hmm.
equipped to tell your story. So I would say start with GarageBand or Adobe Audition, and I'll say end
Hmm.
up at Logic Pro.
Yeah, that's great advice. I can attest to GarageBand. My 2017 audio drama is GarageBand created,
Oh.
and it sounds like that. So, yeah, moving it forward, anything that I do beyond going back to GarageBand is not something that I
Right.
aspire to. So, I respect it for sure.
Good.
So, what role do you think independent creators like yourself play in shaping podcasting, especially the audio drama landscape, particularly in highlighting underrepresented stories?
Oh, what role? Okay. You got to think about Wondery or Amazon or something like that. They're not going to bring these kind of stories unless these stories have an audience. They're going to make stories about truck drivers murdering folks at rest stops and serial killers in the mountains and all kinds of quirkiness because there's an audience they have in mind for that. But if you want them to hear a story about Lady Stephanie of Sinclair, a gangster madam of the Harlem Renaissance, or Bronzeville, the story that Casey Wayland told, you got to do it like they did it. And here I'm talking about two historical stories centered on brown black culture, one made by Casey Wayland and one made by Yanni Washington Smith, Harlem Queen. If those folks didn't make those stories, we wouldn't be hearing those stories on Wondery or Amazon or something like that. So the black creator, you got to do it. Now you could have your script for 6, 7, 8 years and think, oh, I might get a meeting with Wondery, and then I could tell them I went to school with the guy who ran Wondery, and I ain't even got a meeting with him, and he was there when I wanted DGA. So look, you got to do it yourself. You got to make your stuff, put yourself out there. Then, if you want the attention of those folks, you got your audience or whatever, then you can talk to them because they ain't going to be thinking we should make a Black History podcast or we should make a Black Culture podcast or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. It's something that we've always known as creators. You got to do it yourself.
Do it yourself.
Yeah, and not with the intent or aspiration that there's a recognition externally. It's
Exactly.
for us, by us in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and allow that to speak for itself. So, yeah, I respect that, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, final question. Looking back on your career so far, what moments stand out as a defining milestone, and how has it shaped your vision for the future?
Okay. As far as audio,
Yeah.
uh, audio, my career related. Okay. A defining milestone was COVID. All right. So in 2019, I recorded Hoodwinked at a place in Los Angeles called the Metaphor Club. They had a little studio. I recorded. It was 2019. It was fall of 2019. And then NBC Universal was saying, "Hey, you're finalists for this writers program we have, and this is February now. So we need you to come to Burbank for a week and meet with all the people who will decide whether or not you're actually going to be in the program." So I went there. This is February 2020. I was like, "Oh man, let me put this podcast aside because I'm about to be in a paid fellowship at Universal." And I'm like the only black guy there. I hadn't turned 50 yet, but I was going to turn 50 later on that year. So I'm like, this is a diversity program. I was like, the only one over 45 in the room. I'm the only one who looks like Uncle Remus in the room. It's like, how much more diverse can you get than like an old black man in the program? I'm thinking I got age, I got so forth and on. And COVID hit 2 weeks later. Like actually, while we were there at Universal talking with all these people for a week, everyone was hand sanitizing up and starting to stand away from each other before the official word came out. And a week and a half later, COVID hit. And they were like, that we were going to make our announcement. But since this new thing, we're not making any announcements. So I'm like, oh, shit. I got to remain unknown. You know what I mean? I was like, but I recorded my audio drama before all this came about. Maybe it's time that I put it together. So having the break, even though it was short for me because I had to go back to work in May, but having the COVID break allowed me to refocus on my audio drama. And when Universal announced that they weren't going to do the number of finalists that they had said they were going to do before COVID, and they had cut it down to 4 instead of 6, I was one of 16 people in consideration. So I thought my odds were good. But then they cut it down to 4, and they was like, thank you for playing. I had this sort of rejection motivation as well. So I had this rejection motivation, and COVID, you're not going in LA, we weren't going in. I don't know how other people were doing. Some people act different towards regulations. But in LA, we was locked down, right? So I went to work and I came home, wasn't going nowhere. I was upset that I had came to Universal but wasn't chosen. I just dove into getting Hoodwinked together, which was my first audio drama. And you want to talk about a man on fire. I was just all into doing it independently, recording people, having folks send in remote takes and all that. And that was the moment in which I was on my path to commit myself to an audio creator. After the sort of like rebuff by the studio, I went full head on into making the best audio product I could. That's when I went. That's when I
Yeah.
bought fully into it.
Yeah. That's the embodiment of that saying, sometimes things happen for you, not to you. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that adversity thing that some of us got, I got it too. Oh, you
Hmm.
think? Oh, you
Yeah.
thought? Okay, watch this. Yeah,
Hmm.
so respect, man. I really appreciate you sharing that story, because it is a lot of times setbacks, disappointment becomes a distraction. It becomes a distraction from who you are and what you already know you're capable of, because you're distracted with that feeling about what occurred. So to come back to center, right? The center, the creativity,
Great way to put
that you already know that you've got it, and to push through. It's really important. And I think it's so important for those of us who have been creators for a long time to always have that anchor point, that reminder, but also those folks who are aspiring, new, and a setback happens and that makes them throw it all away. I wasn't validated, so I guess I'm not enough. And to that we say, fuck that.
it. Exactly.
Pretty much.
Perfect
Yeah.
way. Hmm. Fuck
Absolutely.
that.
So I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your story. I'm so grateful to have become connected with you in this way. Audio drama, again, for me, it's what started Afros in Audio. It was specifically for audio drama creators, and that went nowhere because it was 2017. So I'm so grateful to see now that we are here.
Hmm.
We're
Hmm.
pushing this genre forward, and thank you. Kudos to you for being a creator in this space.
Thank you. Kudos to you, brother, for being a pioneer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
So tell people where they can listen to Hoodwink, Book, and Olivia, and where they can find you online.
All platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can go to the Buzzsprout and listen to it there. Pandora, with the whole 9 yards. All platforms.
Okay. And
Please,
how can people
please
find
check
you?
them out.
Social media and online.
Audio Auteur, just like it's spelled in the bottom right there. Audio Auteur on Instagram.
Okay.
William Sutphin on Facebook if you want to friend me and message me. And LinkedIn, William Sutphin. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, man. So it's been a pleasure. Is there anything else that you want to leave with the people, and any way that we can support you?
Hey, just go listen to Book on Olivia. Just go listen to Book on Olivia. I think way towards the end, I say, yeah, go to the Patreon of Audio Auteur. But your payment for me is just listening to Book and Olivia, because I'm all right.
Mhm. All right.
Just listen to Book and Olivia.
All right. And I'll raise you one. Listen to it. And if you enjoy it, rate, review,
Please,
subscribe, do all of those things that lets you know that we've listened to it, but also that lets other folks know that you should listen to this too.
man.
That's how we support each other.
Thank you, Talib. Thank you, brother.
For sure, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.